In his last days of life, the millionaire made a shocking request. The virgin neighbor never imagined hearing those words, a cry of pleasure in the midst of the pain of farewell. And her answer became the most talked about secret on the street. What do you think will happen in this story? Comment and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. In the small city of Savannah, between the sea and the hills, where colonial mansions and cobblestone streets told stories of an old America, Victoria Adams walked hurriedly along the historic boardwalk. At 22 years old, with curly hair dancing in the morning breeze, she balanced shopping bags and the weight of responsibilities she had carried since a very young age. The sky was clear, but she barely had time to admire it. She needed to get back, home quickly, where her mother, Helen, was waiting. As she turned the corner onto Blossom Street, one of the most charming in the historic district, Victoria slowed her pace. It was impossible not to contemplate, even if for a few seconds, the imposing mansion that stood at the end of the street, contrasting with the simple houses around it. Willow Creek Manor, as the locals called it, was a modern architectural construction that seemed defiantly out of place in that colonial setting, protected by high walls and an ornate iron gate that rarely opened. "Good morning, Victoria. How is Mrs. Helen today?" The voice of Mr. Joseph, owner of the local grocery store, interrupted her thoughts. "She's a little better, thank God. The new medications seem to be working," she replied, forcing a smile. "Did you set aside the herbs I asked for?" "Of course, my dear. Milk thistle, chamomile, and that fresh lemon balm that Mrs. Helen likes." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's on me today." "Mr. Joseph, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You're like family to me," the gray-haired man with an easy smile insisted. "And the mysterious neighbor? Still keeping out of sight." Victoria instinctively looked toward the mansion. As always, sometimes I wonder if he really exists or if he's just a legend of Savannah. Richard Vanderbilt. The name of Willow Creek Manor's owner was known by everyone, but few could say they had seen his face. A technology sector entrepreneur, he had moved to Savannah 5 years ago, according to rumors, after a personal tragedy that no one could detail with certainty. Stories about him varied from a failed romance to business scandals, but the truth remained protected by the high walls of the property. "They say he's ill," commented Mr. Joseph, lowering his voice as if telling a secret. "Johnny, who delivers groceries there, told me he's looking very weak, hardly leaves his room." "Whatever the truth is, I hope he finds peace," said Victoria, saying goodbye with a wave and resuming her way. The house where Victoria lived with her mother was next to Richard's mansion, separated only by a wall covered with purple bougainvillea. It was a simple construction with white walls and blue windows, with a small garden in front where Helen, before falling ill, had cultivated medicinal herbs and colorful flowers. "I'm home, Mum," announced Victoria as she entered, placing the bags on the wooden kitchen table. Helen was sitting on the back porch, wrapped in a colorful blanket, despite the mild warmth. At 55, her face still retained traces of the beauty that had made her one of the most courted women in town in her youth. An autoimmune disease diagnosed 3 years ago, however, had robbed her of some of her vigor, leaving her dependent on her daughter's care. "You took a while today," observed Helen, as Victoria approached to kiss her forehead. "I stopped by the pharmacy to get your medication, and Mr. Joseph sent that tea you like. That man has a heart of gold." Helen smiled, pointing to the chair beside her. "Sit with me for a bit, you're always running." Victoria obeyed, allowing herself a moment of rest. From there they could see part of the neighboring mansion's gardens through an opening between the trees. The gardens were impeccably maintained, with stone fountains and geometric flower beds, but one rarely saw anyone strolling through them. "Sometimes I find myself imagining what life must be like in there," confessed Victoria, following her mother's gaze. "Having everything money can buy, but living isolated from the world." "Not all the money in the world can buy health or companionship, my dear," philosophized Helen. "They say he lost someone important. Pain transforms people." "How do you know that?" "Savannah is small. Stories run like water over stones. Helen adjusted the blanket over her shoulders. Besides, I recognize loneliness when I see it. There's a certain melancholy in that house that speaks for itself. Victoria reflected on her mother's words. There was something poetic in the way Helen saw the world, even amid suffering. It was one of the many qualities she admired in her. "I need to prepare lunch," said Victoria, standing up. "The doctor said you need to eat better. Always taking care of me. When are you going to take care of your own life? 22 years old? You should be dating, going out with friends, not tied to a sick old woman." "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm not tied to anything. I chose to be here." In truth, Victoria had given up many dreams to care for Helen. She had abandoned her literature degree at the University of Georgia to return to Savannah when her mother fell ill. Now she gave private lessons to tourists and worked part-time at the municipal library, balancing her schedule to always be present at home. That night, while washing the dinner dishes, Victoria heard an unusual noise coming from the garden. It sounded like something falling, followed by a muffled groan. Cautiously, she took a flashlight and went out to check, her heart racing with apprehension. The yellow light of the flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a male figure fallen near the side gate that separated the two properties. For an instant, Victoria froze, but soon the instinct to help overcame fear. "Sir, are you all right?" She approached cautiously. The man raised his face, revealing pale but distinctly elegant features. His eyes, a deep brown, seemed feverish, and his breathing was laborious. He wore expensive clothes but was disheveled, as if he had fought against something. "I need help," he murmured in a hoarse voice. "Please." It was then that Victoria realized. This was Richard Vanderbilt, the mysterious neighbor, the man she only knew through stories and rumors. And now, in a strange twist of fate, he was there, vulnerable and asking for her help. "Can you stand up?" she asked, offering her arm for support. Richard nodded weakly, grabbing the support offered. His body trembled, and Victoria could feel the heat of fever through the thin fabric of his shirt. "I'll help you inside. My mother is sleeping, but I can make tea. Call a doctor." "No." His voice gained sudden strength. "No doctors, I just need to rest a bit. My medication in the mansion. But I can't get back alone." Victoria hesitated. Should she really bring a stranger into the house? But there was something in his gaze, a mixture of desperation and wounded dignity, that moved her. "Lean on me," she decided, guiding him slowly into the simple house, not knowing that this moment would irrevocably change the course of their lives. Dawn in Savannah brought, with it, the smell of the sea mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee that Victoria prepared in the kitchen. The previous night now seemed like a strange dream. Richard Vanderbilt had rested on the living room sofa for a few hours, refusing to go to a hospital, drinking only the herbal tea she had prepared. When he finally managed to compose himself, he insisted on returning to his house, thanking her with formal, almost rehearsed words, before disappearing through the back door. "You look tired," commented Helen, watching her daughter with attentive eyes as she drank her coffee at the kitchen table. "Didn't you sleep well?" Victoria hesitated. She had decided not to tell her mother about the nocturnal visitor to avoid worrying her. "Just a restless night. Nothing serious, Wintas. Are you sure? I heard voices last night." It was impossible to hide something from Helen for long. With a sigh, Victoria sat down and told her about the encounter with Richard. "He seemed so lost, Mom. So different from that powerful figure we imagine." Helen listened in silence, her thin fingers tracing circles on the edge of the cup. "Life has those ironies. Sometimes we need to fall to remember we're human. Do you think he'll be okay?" "Only time will tell. But you did the right thing in helping him, dear." That afternoon, while tidying the small garden, Victoria was surprised by a knock at the side gate. A middle-aged man wearing an impeccable suit despite the heat greeted her formally. "Miss Adams? My name is August Montgomery, personal assistant to Mr. Vanderbilt. He would like to invite you for tea this afternoon as a way to thank you for your kindness." Victoria blinked, disconcerted. "Tea? At the mansion?" "Precisely at 4 o'clock if it's convenient for you." August extended an envelope of thick paper. This is a small preliminary thank you. Inside the envelope was a check with an amount that made Victoria hold her breath. It was enough money to cover 6 months of her mother's medications. I can't. Accept this, she said, returning the envelope. I didn't help your boss expecting a reward. A shadow of surprise passed over the assistant's face. Mr. Vanderbilt rarely accepts a refusal, miss. Then this will be the first time, Victoria replied firmly. Tell him I'll accept the invitation for tea, but only that. August slightly inclined his head, a gleam of respect appearing in his eyes. As you wish. I'll come for you at 4. When the assistant walked away, Victoria noticed her hands were trembling. She had never set foot in Willow Creek, Manor, the place she had always observed from a distance, with a mixture of curiosity and unease. You should go, encouraged Helen when her daughter told her about the invitation, and wear that blue dress that was your grandmother's. It matches your eyes. Mom, it's not a romantic date, it's just a thank you tea. Helen smiled enigmatically. You never know where a simple tea might lead, my dear. At 4 o'clock sharp, Victoria crossed the gates of the mansion, wearing the blue dress suggested by her mother. The beauty of the place impressed her. Meticulously designed gardens with reflecting pools mirroring the sky and modern sculptures contrasting with the tropical vegetation. The main house, a structure of straight lines and large glass windows, seemed to float above the grounds. August led her through an entrance hall decorated with contemporary art to a veranda that offered a stunning view of Savannah Bay. Richard was there standing by the balustrade, wearing light pants and a simple white shirt that contrasted with his tanned skin. He seemed stronger than the night before, although there was still a certain fragility in his posture. Miss Adams, he greeted, turning with a restrained smile. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Up close, in daylight, Victoria could observe him better. He would be about 45 years old, with dark hair sprinkled with grey at the temples and penetrating brown eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many untold stories. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Vanderbilt, she replied, accepting the chair he offered her. How are you feeling today? Better, thanks to your help. He made a gesture, and August served tea in fine porcelain cups. I owe you an apology for the trouble I caused. It was no trouble at all. Anyone would have done the same. Richard tilted his head, studying her with intensity. You refused my financial gratitude. May I ask why? Because kindness has no price, Mr. Vanderbilt. I didn't help you expecting something in return. A silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sound of waves and the occasional singing of a mockingbird. Richard seemed to be processing those words as if they were a foreign concept that needed to be translated. You're a teacher, correct? He finally asked. I give private lessons and work at the municipal library. I had to interrupt my college studies when my mother fell ill. Your mother, Helen, isn't it? I heard she was a talented artist. Victoria raised her eyebrows, surprised. You know my mother? Savannah is small, as you must know, and I have an interest in local art. He paused, taking a sip of tea. Your work at the library must be fascinating. It is gratifying, yes, especially when I manage to spark an interest in reading in a child. And your work? They say you're in the technology business. Richard nodded. I founded a software company 20 years ago. Now it practically runs itself, which gives me the freedom to hide here. The unexpected frankness of that last phrase caught Victoria by surprise. It's not hiding if this place brings you peace, she responded softly. Something in his eyes changed, a gleam of recognition, perhaps even gratitude for the absence of judgment in her words. Do you like literature, Victoria? The change to her first name didn't go unnoticed. It's my passion, especially the American classics, Faulkner, Hemingway. I have a considerable library. Would you like to see it? The invitation was tempting. Victoria nodded, following him into the house. The library was a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling shelves of dark wood, filled with books organized by themes and authors. Inviting leather armchairs were arranged by the windows, creating perfect spaces for reading. It's wonderful, she whispered, running her fingers over the spines of the books with reverence. You can come here whenever you want. offered Richard, observing the delight on her face. Consider this space yours as well. Why? The question escaped before Victoria could contain it. Why what? Why this kindness to me? You hardly know me. Richard walked to the window, contemplating the distant sea for a few moments before answering. When you helped me yesterday, you didn't see the businessman, the rich man, the recluse everyone talks about. You just saw someone needing help. He turned to face her. Do you know how long it's been since someone looked at me that way, as a simple human being? The vulnerability in that confession touched Victoria deeply. There was something profoundly lonely about this man, surrounded by material wealth but apparently devoid of genuine connections. I have a request to make, he continued, approaching. It may seem strange, but I would like you to teach me. Teach you what? To live like an ordinary person. A sad smile played on his lips. I want to go to the market, walk on the beach without being recognized, have coffee in a simple diner, feel the taste of life that exists beyond these walls. Would you be my Bayam guide? The proposal was so unexpected that Victoria didn't know how to respond immediately. Part of her was intrigued, another part cautious. Why me? Because you looked me in the eyes and saw Richard, not Vanderbilt. He paused. I'll pay for your time, of course. It's not about money, she protested. It's an unusual proposal. I know, and I'll understand if you refuse. His eyes reflected contained hope. But I'd like you to consider it. To that moment, observing the man before her, powerful and vulnerable at the same time, Victoria felt she was at a crossroads. Accepting that request would mean intertwining her fate with his in ways she couldn't predict. I need to think, she finally said. Richard nodded, respecting her hesitation. That's fair. In the meantime, take this to your mother. He took a worn-covered book from one of the shelves. They say poetry calms the soul in difficult times. It was a rare edition of poems by Emily Dickinson. Victoria accepted the gift with a murmur of gratitude, aware that regardless of her decision, something important had begun there, among the silent books of that sumptuous library. The sun had not yet fully risen when Victoria met Richard at the side gate that separated the two properties. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a white t-shirt and a cap that partially shadowed his face. He looked younger this way, almost unrecognizable compared to the imposing figure who inhabited the mansion. I thought you had changed your mind, he commented, visibly relieved to see her. 3 days had passed since the invitation in the library. Victoria had needed that time to reflect, talk with her mother, and finally accept being Richard's guide to the everyday world he seemed so eager to know. We agreed on 6, didn't we? She smiled, adjusting the strap of her straw bag on her shoulder. First lesson of the real world. Punctuality is essential, especially when the destination is the farmer's market. Savannah's farmer's market, set up twice a week near the dock, was an explosion of colors, smells, and sounds. Vendors announced products loudly, the aroma of tropical fruits mixed with that of fresh fish, and the music of a local guitarist created the perfect soundtrack for that sensory experience. Richard walked alongside Victoria with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. His eyes scanned the stalls, absorbing every detail while his body seemed tense, as if he didn't know exactly how to behave in that environment. Relax, whispered Victoria, noticing his tension. Nobody's paying attention to you. That's the beauty of places like this. Everyone is too busy with their own lives. Gradually, he loosened up. He watched attentively how Victoria negotiated the price of a pound of bananas, tasted a guava offered by a woman with a broad smile, and even helped choose fresh basil for the sauce she planned to prepare. Miss Victoria, it's been a while. A black woman with grey hair tied in a colourful scarf waved from her stall of herbs and spices. Mrs. Zelda! Victoria approached, embracing her warmly. How's the knee? Oh, better, thanks to that tea your mother taught me. And who is this handsome man? Mrs. Zelda's attentive eyes examined Richard with curiosity. This is Richard, a friend. Victoria felt her cheeks flush slightly with the hesitation. Richard, this is Mrs. Zelda, the person who knows everything about medicinal plants in Savannah. A pleasure to meet you, Mom. Richard extended his hand formally but was surprised when Zelda pulled him into a tight hug. None of that formality at my stall, my son. A friend of Victoria's is a friend of mine. She stepped back, studying him with perceptive eyes. You have sad eyes, did you know? Take some of this chamomile and lemon balm tea every night. Calms the spirit. Victoria watched, amused, as Richard, disconcerted, accepted a small bag of dried herbs from the vendor's hands. Thank you, he murmured, tucking the package in his pocket. They continued through the market, their bags becoming increasingly full. Richard insisted on carrying everything, seeming strangely satisfied with that simple task. I never imagined choosing tomatoes could be so engaging, he commented as they walked back. Victoria laughed. It's because each choice matters when you're going to prepare the food yourself. It's not the same as having someone do it for you. You're right. He paused, contemplative. What else is on today's schedule, teacher? The playful tone in his voice took her by surprise. It was the first time she had seen Richard truly relaxed. Now we're going to cook. She gestured towards her house. If you don't mind a simple kitchen. I prefer your kitchen to any starred restaurant today. Helen's expression upon seeing Richard Vanderbilt entering her living room, loaded with market bags, was priceless. Victoria had warned that she would bring a guest, but clearly her mother hadn't expected it to be the mysterious neighbor. Mr. Vanderbilt, what a pleasant surprise. Helen adjusted the shawl over her shoulders, straightening, in the armchair. Victoria told me about your interest in everyday experiences. Please call me Richard. He deposited the bags on the kitchen table. And yes, your daughter has kindly agreed to be my guide in the real world. A world that has always been within your reach, observed Helen softly, with no judgment in her voice. We're not always ready for what's before us, are we? Richard responded, exchanging with her a look of mutual understanding that Victoria couldn't decipher. The morning transformed into an improvised cooking class. Victoria taught Richard how to cut vegetables, watch your fingers, dose spices, a little black pepper, not too much, and appreciate the process as much as the result. For someone accustomed to giving orders and having everything done by others, he showed himself surprisingly willing to learn, absorbing each instruction with genuine attention. I've never cooked anything in my life, he confessed, watching the tomato sauce bubble on the stove. Not even a fried egg. It's never too late to start, replied Victoria, guiding his hand as he stirred the sauce. There was a comfortable proximity between them now, born from the simplicity of that shared moment. The aroma of basil and garlic filled the kitchen, creating an atmosphere of domestic intimacy that seemed to envelop everyone in a cocoon of normality. When they finally sat down to lunch, Richard, Victoria, and Helen, something had changed. The invisible barriers that separated their lives seemed to have dissolved, at least temporarily. They talked about books, music, Savannah's stories, avoiding topics that could remind them of the differences between their worlds. This is the best pasta I've ever eaten, declared Richard, savoring each forkful as if it were a new experience. That's because you helped prepare it, replied Helen. Food has another flavor when our hands participate in the process. After lunch, while Helen rested, Victoria took Richard to see Savannah's historic center on foot, like a true local, not as the owner of Willow Creek Manor. This place has more life than I imagined, he commented as they crossed a square where children played and elderly people played dominoes in the shade of centuries-old trees. Life happens everywhere, Richard. We just need to be willing to see it. They sat on a stone bench observing the movement. A group of musicians played jazz in a corner of the square, and couples of all ages danced spontaneously to the sound of the saxophone, trumpet, and piano. Do you dance? Asked Richard, his gaze fixed on the pairs moving with natural grace. Not very well, admitted Victoria. My mother tried to teach me, but I have 2 left feet. Perhaps it's just a matter of finding the right partner. He stood up, extending his hand in a silent invitation. Victoria hesitated. Here? In front of everyone? Nobody's paying attention to us, remember? That's the beauty of places like this. He repeated her words, with a smile that lit up his face. Surrendering to the moment, She accepted his hand. Richard led her with surprising skill, his sure steps guiding her in the cadenced rhythm of jazz. Victoria soon discovered that dancing wasn't so difficult when you trusted your partner. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, impressed. "My grandmother taught me when I was a child. Before—" He let the phrase die in the air, a shadow passing over his eyes. "Let's say it was a long time ago." The music changed to something slower, more intimate. They continued dancing, now closer, aware of the subtle change in the atmosphere between them. They were no longer just neighbors, nor guide and tourist. They were two people connected by something that didn't yet have a name, but was growing with each shared moment. "Thank you for today," murmured Richard near her ear, "for showing me that beauty still exists in simple things." When the sun began to set, they returned walking slowly, in no hurry to end the day. The golden light of dusk bathed the cobblestone streets, creating elongated shadows and an almost magical scenery. "May I ask you a personal question?" Victoria broke the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Of course. Why now? Why did you decide to leave those walls right now?" Richard stopped walking, looking at the horizon where the sun was setting over the sea. For a moment, Victoria thought he wouldn't answer. "Because I realized I was alive but wasn't living." His voice had a different quality now, deeper, truer. "And because life is too short to be wasted on regrets." There was something unsaid in those words, a subtext that Victoria intuited but couldn't fully decipher. Before she could ask more, they reached the gate that separated their properties. "Same time, day after tomorrow?" he asked, like someone who doesn't want to end that connection. Victoria nodded. "I have classes in the morning, but we can meet in the afternoon. There's a special place I want to show you. I'll be waiting." He leaned in and, in an unexpected gesture, kissed her softly on the cheek. The touch of his lips was brief, but left a feeling of warmth that remained even after he had moved away. That night, lying in her bed, Victoria rethought each moment of the day, each conversation, each exchanged glance. She had started that journey thinking she would teach Richard to live like an ordinary person, but now realized that perhaps she was the one learning something new, about unexpected connections, about how life could change direction when least expected, and about how the heart sometimes chose paths that reason couldn't explain. The following weeks brought a new routine to Victoria's life. The afternoons with Richard became expected moments, islands of discovery and lightness amid daily responsibilities. Together, they explored the deserted beaches beyond the city, tried food in small family restaurants where no one recognized. Him watched the sunset from hidden viewpoints that only locals knew. In each shared experience, the layers surrounding Richard seemed to unravel one by one. The distant and mysterious businessman gave way to a man who laughed with genuine pleasure at feeling the sand between his toes, who was moved by the simplicity of a breakfast prepared by friendly hands, who listened to stories from local fishermen with true interest. "You look different," commented Helen one afternoon as she watched her daughter getting ready for another meeting. "There's a light in you that I haven't seen in a long time." Victoria blushed, adjusting the light dress she had chosen. "It's just the excitement of showing Savannah to someone who has never really known it." "It's more than that, daughter. Your eyes shine when you talk about him." Helen held Victoria's hand affectionately. "Just be careful with your heart. People like Richard Vanderbilt come from a very different world than ours." "He's not like we thought, Mom. There's so much loneliness in him, so much thirst for simple experiences." Victoria hesitated, uncertain how to express the transformation she witnessed daily. "It's as if he's awakening to life for the first time." "Or for the last time," murmured Helen, so low that Victoria almost didn't hear. "What do you mean?" Helen shook her head. "Nothing important. Go have fun. Life is made of these precious moments." That afternoon, Richard took her to see a place she surprisingly had never visited, the orchid greenhouse at the back of his property. It was a magical space, a cathedral of glass where hundreds of rare species flowered in a controlled explosion. "Of colors and shapes. I've never seen anything so beautiful," whispered Victoria, gently touching a purple petal. "My grandmother was passionate about orchids," explained Richard, guiding her among the tables full of pots. She taught me that these flowers need patience and attention to thrive. Some take years to bloom, but when they do, he made a gesture encompassing the environment. It's worth every second of waiting. Your grandmother seems to have been a special woman. She was the only person who really knew me. A melancholic smile crossed his face. When she passed away, something in me closed off. I built companies, accumulated fortune, but forgot the most important lessons she tried to teach me. Which lessons? That wealth without purpose is just weight, that human connections are the real treasure. He approached, his eyes fixed on hers. That sometimes we find light in the most unexpected places. Victoria's heart accelerated. There was an intensity in his gaze that conveyed more than words could express. For a moment, it seemed he was going to lean in to kiss her, but instead, Richard abruptly moved away as if he had been hit by a sudden pain. Richard, is everything okay? Just a passing dizziness. He forced a smile, but the pallor on his face betrayed his discomfort. It happens sometimes. Nothing to worry about. But Victoria had noticed other signs in recent weeks. The moments when he needed to stop to catch his breath during walks, the discreet ingestion of medications when he thought she wasn't looking, the days when he needed to cancel their meetings without explanation. You're sick, aren't you? The question came out more as a statement. His silence was answer enough. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want that to define our friendship. Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. I wanted you to see me as a person, not as a patient. What kind of illness is it? A heart condition, congenital, complicated by years of stress and poor diet. He shrugged, as if talking about the weather. Doctors have different opinions about how much time I have left, but they agree it's not much. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. In recent months, without realizing it, he had become an important part of her life, someone for whom her feelings grew each day. The idea of losing him caused a pain she didn't expect to feel. Is there treatment, surgery? There are options, yes, but with considerable risks, and I don't know if I want to go through that. He gently touched her face. But let's not talk about that now. This moment is too precious to be wasted with worries. That night, unable to sleep, Victoria went to Richard's library. He had given her a key weeks earlier, insisting she use the space whenever she wanted. The house was quiet. August and the few employees had already retired, and Richard was probably in his private quarters upstairs. The library was her favorite refuge in the mansion, a space that combined both their love for literature and had become a symbol of the bridge they built between their very different worlds. As she browsed the shelves, seeking distraction in familiar titles, she noticed a semi-hidden door behind a side bookcase. Moved by curiosity, she turned the handle. It was a small personal study, with an ancient dark wood desk, leather chairs, and walls covered with photographs and newspaper clippings. What caught her attention, however, was a dark-covered book on the desk. It looked like a diary. Victoria knew she shouldn't invade Richard's privacy, but something impelled her to better understand the man who was quickly conquering her heart. With hesitant fingers, she opened the diary. The first pages dated from 20 years ago, written in the firm handwriting of a younger man. They recounted the foundation of his company, the first successes, the excitement of building something from scratch. But as she advanced in reading, the tone changed. There were notes about loneliness, about failed relationships with people who only saw the businessman, never the man. One entry in particular captured her attention. Today marks 10 years since Marianne left. I still wonder if it could have been different. If I had had the courage to abandon everything, to follow my heart instead of hiding behind spreadsheets and contracts, maybe she would be here now. Maybe I wouldn't be so empty. Success exacts a price we only understand when it's too late to negotiate. Pages ahead, she found mentions of his health condition, diagnosed 5 years earlier. The notes were clinical at first, recording treatments and medical opinions, but gradually they transformed into deep reflections on mortality and regrets. Doctors. Talk about limited time as if this were news. Every life is limited. The difference is that now I know approximately my deadline. It's strange how this certainty changes everything. Suddenly, board meetings seem irrelevant, the numbers in bank accounts empty of meaning. What have I done with my days? I built an empire that no one will inherit, accumulated fortunes I cannot take with me, and worst of all, I never truly loved, never allowed myself to be completely vulnerable with another human being. The most recent entries talked about the decision to move to Savannah, seeking peace in the last years or months he had left. And then, to her surprise, she found mentions of herself. The neighbor, Victoria. There's something about her that intrigues me, an authenticity I lost so long ago. When she looks at me, I feel she sees beyond the layers I've built over the years. It's frightening and liberating at the same time. And the most recent entry, dated just 3 days ago. Each moment with Victoria makes me question the choices I've made in life. She shows me a world where genuine connections matter more than material achievements, where simplicity brings more joy than luxury, where being vulnerable is not weakness, but strength. I'm falling in love with her, and it terrifies me. It would be cruel to offer my heart to someone when I know I don't have a future to promise. But it would also be a betrayal to myself to deny what I feel in the few precious moments I have left. Victoria closed the diary, silent tears streaming down her face. His words had perfectly captured the dilemma growing in her own heart, the sweet torture of falling in love with someone whose stay in her life was uncertain. You shouldn't be reading that. Richard's voice startled her. He was standing in the doorway wearing a dark robe, his face marked by fatigue, but with no apparent anger in his eyes. I'm sorry. Victoria stood up hurriedly, embarrassed at being caught in the act. I had no right. Perhaps you did. He entered the study, approaching slowly. Maybe it was easier for you to discover this way than for me to find the words to say what I feel. Richard, Don't say anything now. He touched her face tenderly, wiping a tear with his thumb. Just answer one thing. Knowing what you know now about my health, about the limited time, do you still want to continue what we started? The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Victoria knew that the answer would define not just that moment, but the entire path ahead. Yes, she finally answered, with a certainty that surprised herself. Each moment is worth it for itself, Richard, and I'd rather have memories to keep than regrets for something I didn't experience. He closed his eyes for an instant, as if completely absorbing those words. When he opened them again, there was a vulnerability in them that Victoria had never witnessed before. I'm afraid of hurting you, he confessed, his voice almost a whisper, of being selfish in asking you to embark on a journey that has a predictable end. All of life has a predictable end, she replied, repeating the reflection she had read in the diary. The difference is that some of us have the privilege of knowing that each second matters. At that moment, the last barriers between them crumbled. Richard pulled her to him, his lips finding hers in a kiss that contained as much desire as desperation, as much promise as farewell. It was the kiss of someone who knew the value of time, who understood the meaning of each heartbeat. When they finally separated, they remained embraced in the silence of the library, witnessed only by the books that had seen so many stories. Over the centuries, some with happy endings, others marked by tragedy, but absolutely all valid for having been intensely lived. Dawn in Savannah had different colors now. For Victoria, the sunrise carried not just the promise of a new day, but the acute awareness of its preciousness. Each morning was a gift to be unwrapped with reverence, each moment with Richard a treasure to be carefully stored in memory. After the night of revelation in the library, their relationship had transformed. What began as a curious friendship between neighbors from distinct worlds was now an acknowledged love, intense and urgent, a love that existed under the constant shadow of an invisible clock whose ticking only they could hear. You're distracted. Today, observed Helen as Victoria prepared breakfast, her gaze lost in the window that overlooked the gardens of the neighboring mansion. Just thinking, Mom. About Richard, Helen smiled with understanding. You've been spending a lot of time at Willow Creek Manor lately. Victoria nodded, serving tea in her mother's cup. There was no longer any way to hide what was happening between her and Richard. In the last 2 months, their lives had become intertwined in ways that neither could have predicted. She divided her time between caring for her mother, giving her lessons, and being with Richard. In the mansion, on the streets of Savannah, on deserted beaches, in every corner that could shelter their growing intimacy. "He asked me to move there," she finally revealed, sitting at the table. "For us to be together for the time that we still have." Helen studied her daughter's face for a long moment before responding. "And what did you answer?" "That I can't leave you, Mom. That my place is here, taking care of you." "Oh, my dear." Helen covered Victoria's hand with hers. "I won't be the reason for you to give up the chance to live this love. I can hire someone to help me with daily care." "But the money—" "Richard has already offered for that," interrupted Helen softly. "He came to talk to me yesterday while you were at the library." Victoria's eyes widened in surprise. "He came here? To talk to you about this?" "Yes." "He was very respectful. Said he understands how important I am to you and that he doesn't want to separate mother and daughter. He offered to hire a nurse to accompany me full-time and adapt one of the rooms in the mansion for me if I want to move too." "And what did you answer?" "That I would accept the nurse but prefer to stay in my own house." Helen smiled. "I'm already used to my little corner. Besides," she made a significant pause, "young couples need privacy." Victoria blushed intensely. "Mom? Daughter, I'm 55, not 95. I know how to recognize when two people are in love." Helen squeezed her daughter's hand. "Life is too short to waste the moments of happiness it offers us." That afternoon, when Victoria told Richard she accepted his proposal, his face lit up, with a joy that seemed to rejuvenate him. "I'll prepare everything," he said, embracing her with fervor. "The room with the best view will be yours." "Ours," she corrected, smiling against his chest. "If we're going to do this, we'll do it right." The move was discreet, but didn't go unnoticed in small Savannah. Soon there were whispers about the young teacher who now lived in Willow Creek Manor with the mysterious millionaire. Some disapproving looks followed her when she passed through the historic center. Some conversations were interrupted when she entered stores. "Don't mind them," Richard would say when he noticed her hurt by the comments. "People always fear what they don't understand." But it wasn't just external looks that brought challenges. Living between two worlds, the simple and the luxurious, the local and the cosmopolitan, required constant adaptations. Victoria continued giving her lessons and working at the library, insisting on maintaining her financial independence despite Richard's protests. He in turn still managed his businesses from a distance, albeit with less frequency and intensity. On a particularly difficult morning, when Richard had spent the night with pains and difficulty breathing, Victoria found an anonymous note left under the door of the municipal library. "How much is your dignity worth? Everyone knows you're only with him out of interest, taking advantage of a sick man's last days to secure your inheritance." The cruel words hit her like a slap. Victoria crumpled the paper angrily, tears of indignation blurring her vision. Was that what everyone thought? That she was just an opportunist? Upon returning to the mansion that day, she found Richard in the orchid greenhouse talking to his gardener. Upon seeing her, his face lit up as always happened, but she couldn't disguise her disturbance. "What happened?" he asked when they were alone, noticing her red eyes. Victoria hesitated but ended up showing the crumpled note. Richard read it in silence, his face gradually hardening. "Who left this?" "I don't know. It was under the door of the library." He tore the paper into tiny pieces, throwing them into a nearby trash can. "Don't listen to this, it's just envy and ignorance." "But what if more people think like this? What if they believe I'm with you for money? And since when does it matter what others think?" Richard held her face between his hands. "We know the truth. Your mother knows. August, who sees us every day, knows. The people who really matter understand what we have. I'm afraid these rumors will affect my work, my reputation in town. If that happens, we'll face it together." He hugged her, his body conveying a strength that contradicted his physical fragility. "Never allow others' pettiness to contaminate what we've built." But the notes continued to appear. In the library, at the door of Victoria's old house where Helen still lived, sometimes even on the windshield of the car Richard had bought for her. Each message more venomous than the previous, insinuating that she was a fortune hunter or worse. The situation reached its peak when Victoria was approached by an elegant woman as she left the library, Patricia Mays, niece of one of the largest investors in Richard's company. "So you're Richard's new companion?" Her tone made clear what she thought of that relationship. "I must say you're younger than I imagined. Can I help you with something?" Victoria maintained her composure, though her heart beat rapidly. "Actually, I came to help you." Patricia smiled coldly. "I wanted you to know that my uncle and other board members are very concerned about Richard's recent decisions, especially that one about changing his will." Victoria froze. "Will? What are you talking about?" "Oh, you don't know." Patricia's false surprise was irritating. Richard altered his will 2 weeks ago, revoked the planned donations to charitable institutions, and directed most of his fortune to, well, to you. The revelation hit Victoria like a punch. Richard had never mentioned anything about a will or inheritance. "That's none of my business," she finally managed to say, "and certainly none of yours." "On the contrary, dear, the mental health of one of my uncle's company's largest shareholders concerns us greatly, and a man who at the edge of the end changes his will to benefit a recent friend clearly isn't in his right mind. You don't know anything about us." Victoria's voice trembled with contained anger. "I know enough." Patricia adjusted her expensive bag on her shoulder. "I just came to warn that there will be legal challenges. Don't think it will be easy to get your hands on that money when he's gone." When Patricia walked away, Victoria remained motionless, stunned by the information. That night, while they dined on the veranda overlooking the sea, she confronted Richard. "Why didn't you tell me about the will?" He paused with his fork halfway to his mouth, surprise evident in his gaze. "Who told you about that?" "Patricia. Mays approached me today, said you changed your will to benefit me and that the company board is concerned about your mental health." Richard set down his utensils slowly, a tired sigh escaping his lips. "I was going to tell you at the right time. I didn't want you to think I'm trying to buy you somehow. Why did you do it? You've barely known me for 6 months. Time enough to recognize what's true." He extended his hand across the table, holding hers. "Before you entered my life, my plan was to leave everything to an impersonal foundation. But now," his eyes sought hers, "I want my legacy to have meaning, to touch real lives. And I trust you to make that happen. People will say I manipulated you, that this was my plan from the beginning. So what? I know the truth." He squeezed her hand. "In the will, I only ask that you create an institution to help single mothers and children in vulnerable situations. The rest, a comfortable life for you and your mother, is just fair for someone who brought so much light to my last days." Silent. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. His generosity moved her, but also brought the weight of responsibility and the acute pain of the imminent loss. "I don't want your money, Richard. I want more time with you." He stood up, walking around the table to embrace her. "I also wanted more time, my love, but I was already given more than I deserved when you entered my life." That night, while Richard slept beside her, Victoria remained awake, watching the moonlight that entered through the wide windows of the bedroom. She thought about life's ironies, how her existence had transformed completely in such a short time, how love could simultaneously be the greatest gift and the most painful ordeal. The next morning, she found an envelope on her bedside table. Inside, a handwritten letter in Richard's elegant handwriting. "My dear Victoria, if you're reading this, it's because I finally found courage to share not just my days, but also my deepest thoughts. When we met, I was a man who had given up. Not on life, that happened much earlier, but on the possibility of feeling something true again. You changed that. With your genuine simplicity, your ability to see beauty in small things, you taught me to rediscover the world. I know people talk I know they question your motives, that they doubt what we've built. Don't allow that to stain what we have. Some loves weren't made to be understood by the world, only intensely lived by those fortunate enough to experience them. About the will, it's not a payment for your love, but a recognition of how much you transformed not just my last days, but the entire meaning of my existence. I want my fortune, built in years of solitude and empty work, to finally serve a greater purpose, and I trust you to give life to that purpose. Always remember, you didn't just give me companionship, you gave me redemption, the chance to depart, knowing that in the end, I managed to love and be loved without reservations. Eternally yours, Richard. Victoria folded the letter against her chest, letting tears flow freely now. They weren't tears just of sadness for the inevitable loss that approached, but also of gratitude for the extraordinary gift that was to love and be loved so completely, even for a limited time. At that moment, she made a decision. She wouldn't allow rumors, anonymous notes or threats of legal challenges to stain what they had. She would live each remaining day beside Richard with the same intensity and authenticity that had marked their relationship from the beginning. The world could judge, but couldn't touch what existed between them, a love that, in its brevity, contained more truth and depth than many lifelong relationships. Winter came to Savannah, bringing with it shorter days and a dampness that penetrated the bones. For Richard, the climatic changes represented an additional challenge. His condition worsened gradually, and the doctors who came from Atlanta to consult him at home spoke increasingly about quality of life instead of treatments, a euphemism that Victoria had learned to translate with growing anguish. Despite this, they had established a routine that brought comfort to both. On mornings when Richard felt well, they had coffee together on the veranda, watching the sea change moods according to the weather. He worked a few hours in his office, taking care of pending matters from his companies, while Victoria gave her lessons. In the afternoon, when she returned, they shared moments in the library reading to each other, or walked slowly through the gardens when weather permitted. "I have something to show you," said Richard on a particularly clear July morning, when the winter sun created golden patterns on the wooden floor of the bedroom. He seemed more animated than in previous days, a renewed gleam in his eyes that made Victoria's heart warm with hope. Maybe he was getting better. Maybe the new medications were working. "What is it?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the bed as he dressed carefully. "A surprise. Something I've been working on over the last few months." He smiled mysteriously. "It will require a small trip. Do you have classes today?" "I do, but I can cancel." "No, don't do that. We can go in the afternoon when you return. August has already prepared everything." Curiosity accompanied Victoria throughout the morning. While explaining verb conjugations to her foreign students, her mind wandered, imagining what Richard might have prepared. In recent times, he had become more introspective, spending hours in his private office with the door closed, sometimes conversing in phone calls she couldn't hear. When she returned to the mansion after classes, she found him in the entrance hall, dressed more formally than usual, with a light linen suit that accentuated his natural elegance, despite his growing thinness. "Ready for our little adventure?" he asked, extending his hand. A car awaited them at the entrance, with August at the wheel. During the journey, Richard maintained the mystery, distracting Victoria with stories of his youth, memories he rarely shared, as if he were finally opening the last doors of his past to her. After about 40 minutes, they left the main road, following a well-maintained dirt path that wound between trees of the Appalachian forest. Finally, they reached a clearing where a wooden and glass construction rose harmoniously integrated with the surrounding nature. "What is this place?" asked Victoria, marveled by the simple and elegant beauty of the structure. "It's yours." Richard smiled, observing her reaction. "Or rather, it will be for many people, thanks to you." August opened the car door, and Richard led Victoria along the stone path that led to the entrance. Inside, she found a spacious and welcoming space, bright rooms with comfortable furniture, bookshelves, study tables, and what appeared to be a small infirmary. "I don't understand." "This is the beginning of the institution I mentioned in the will." Richard gently squeezed her hand. The New Dawn Institute. A place where single mothers, children in vulnerable situations, and young people without access to education can find support, knowledge, and opportunities. Victoria turned slowly, absorbing every detail of the space. There was something in the colors, in the arrangement of furniture, in the energy of the place that seemed strangely familiar. You designed this based on my old house, she realized, recognizing patterns and elements that referred to the welcoming simplicity where she had grown up. Yes, I wanted it to have the same essence, that feeling of home that you and your mother created, even with few resources. He watched her reaction attentively. I didn't want to wait to start this. I wanted to see the project born participate at least in its first steps. Emotion closed Victoria's throat. The care, the thought behind that gesture went beyond financial generosity. It was a profound demonstration of how Richard had understood what really mattered to her. "Come, there's more to see," he said, guiding her down a hallway to a double wooden door. "This part is especially for you." Upon opening the door, Victoria found herself in a smaller, more intimate library than the one in the mansion, but equally special. The shelves contained a careful selection of children's and young adult books, American literature classics, and educational works. In the center, a large round table invited reading circles, and colorful beanbags were strategically scattered throughout the space. "For your literature classes," explained Richard. "I imagined you could bring your students here, maybe create reading incentive programs." "It's perfect," she whispered, too moved to say more. They continued the tour of the building, which also included a community kitchen, rooms for professional courses, and even a small lodging for emergency cases. Each space had been thoughtfully designed, reflecting the conversations they had over the months, the dreams Victoria had shared, sometimes without realizing he was keeping every word. "The Institute is already legally established," explained Richard as they sat on a bench in the newly planted garden. "The resources for the first 5 years of operation are guaranteed, regardless of what happens to me. After that, the main fund of the will takes over." "You thought of everything," murmured Victoria, still trying to process the magnitude of that gift. "I tried." He smiled, although there was a shadow of fatigue in his eyes now. "I wanted to make sure you would have a purpose, something greater than our story to carry forward, something that would make sense for the person you are." "Our story would already be purpose enough for me," she replied, holding his hands between hers. "I know, and that's why you deserve this." Richard took a deep breath, like someone gathering courage. "There's something else I need to tell you, Victoria, something I discovered recently." The serious tone in his voice made her heart tighten with apprehension. "What is it?" "Remember those days when I was indisposed, when I needed to go to Atlanta for consultations?" She nodded. They had been difficult weeks, with Richard more withdrawn, almost secretive about the results of the exams. The doctors found a new treatment option, an experimental procedure that could not only stabilize my condition, but potentially reverse it. Victoria's eyes widened. That's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because the success rate is low, and the risks considerable." He gently squeezed her hands. "For a long time I thought it wasn't worth trying, that it was better to accept the inevitable with dignity, enjoy the time I had left without the agony of false hopes." "And now?" "Now." A soft smile illuminated his tired face. "Now I've found something worth fighting for. Someone for whom I want to live, not just months, but years if possible. Hope," that dangerous emotion Victoria had tried to keep under control, bloomed in her chest like a wildflower after rain. "When would the procedure be?" "Next week, at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta." Richard seemed simultaneously determined and vulnerable. "I wanted to show you the institute before in case—" "No." She placed a finger on his lips. "Let's not talk about in case. Let's believe it will work." He nodded, though his eyes revealed he understood the fragility of that promise. On the way back to Savannah, observing Richard's profile against the sky that was beginning to be tinged with the colors of dusk, Victoria felt a complex mixture of emotions. Gratitude for the extraordinary gift he had created, hope for the possibility of a future together, and a deep fear of what the next week might bring. The days leading up to the surgery passed in a blur of preparations, conversations with doctors via video conference, and moments of silent intimacy where both avoided talking about what was to come, preferring to fully inhabit the present. On the eve of departure for Atlanta, while packing a small suitcase with Richard's belongings, Victoria found an intricately carved wooden box she had never seen before, carefully placed at the bottom of a drawer. Moved by curiosity, she opened it. Inside, she found a collection of small baby objects, a pair of crocheted booties, a silver rattle, a light blue blanket embroidered with stars. Her heart raced upon realizing the meaning of those items. Could it be that Richard suspected? She hadn't told him yet. The symptoms started 2 weeks ago: morning sickness, breast tenderness, a fatigue different from usual. The pharmacy test, done in secret in the bathroom of the municipal library, had confirmed her suspicions. But with the surgery approaching, she had decided to wait for a more appropriate moment to share the news. Now, looking at those little treasures kept with such care, she realized that perhaps he already knew, or at least hoped for it. The idea that Richard had bought those presents, preparing for a possibility he might not live to see, brought tears to her eyes. "You found my secret." His voice startled her. Richard was standing in the closet doorway, observing her with a soft expression. "I was going to wait until after the surgery to ask," he continued, approaching slowly. "But now that you've discovered—" He knelt beside her, one hand gently touching her still flat belly. "I'm right, aren't I? There's a life growing here." Victoria nodded, unable to contain tears now. "How did you know?" "I didn't know for certain, but I hoped." He smiled, a serene joy illuminating his tired face. "I noticed the changes in you, the nausea you tried to hide, the way you refused wine at the last dinner with August. And maybe I just wanted it so much that I started seeing signs everywhere. I was going to tell you after the surgery. I didn't want you to worry about one more thing." "Worry?" Richard laughed softly, pulling her into an embrace. "Victoria, this is the most wonderful news I could receive before tomorrow. It's one more reason to fight, to come back to you." That night, lying in the large bed they had shared for the last months, Richard and Victoria talked about the future, not with the melancholy of those who know they might not share it, but with the cautious hope of those who glimpse possibilities, previously unthinkable. "If it's a boy," said Richard, his hand resting protectively on her belly, "I'd like him to have a name that symbolizes renewal. And if it's a girl, a name that represents light, like you brought to my life." The next morning, as the sun rose over Savannah Bay, they departed for Atlanta. The procedure was scheduled for the following day, giving them time to settle in and complete the final preparatory exams. In the car, Victoria noticed that Richard was holding a brown envelope. "What's that?" "Another surprise." He smiled enigmatically. "Something for you to read while waiting during the surgery, but promise you'll only open it when I'm in the operating room." "I promise," she replied, accepting the envelope with curiosity. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of emotions. The hospital, one of the most prestigious in the country, intimidated with its antiseptic corridors and the clinical efficiency of its team. Richard underwent a final battery of tests, and Victoria remained at his side, trying to convey a confidence she didn't always feel. On the morning of the surgery, while the nurses prepared Richard, they had a few minutes alone. "Remember the first night? When I appeared in your garden almost fainting?" he asked, holding her hand. "How could I forget? You looked like an elegant ghost." "That night I thought I was looking for help." He smiled, caressing her face with his free hand. "Only later did I realize I was looking for you, my salvation in every possible sense. And you were mine," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him softly. "My unlikely love." When it finally came time to take him, Victoria maintained her smile until the gurney disappeared through the double doors of the surgical center. Only then did she allow tears to come, a mixture of fear and hope that seemed too big for her chest. Seated in the waiting room, She remembered the envelope. With trembling fingers, she opened it and found a stack of handwritten pages. On the first sheet, she read, "To Victoria, what you hold in your hands is an unfinished novel. I began writing it many years ago, when loneliness was my only constant companion. It's the story of a man who, having everything money can buy, discovers that true wealth resides in the human connections we build. For years, I couldn't finish this story. Something essential was missing, a heart that beat in its pages, a truth I hadn't experienced myself. Then you entered my life and I finally understood what was missing. The end of this story is now being written, not just in these pages, but in our shared life, in the child growing in your womb, in the institute we built together. Regardless of today's outcome, know that you have already given me the perfect ending. An ending that transcends the time we were given, that echoes in eternity through the lives we'll touch together. With infinite love, Richard." Victoria closed her eyes, pressing the pages against her chest like a talisman. Outside, Savannah life continued. The sea kissed the coast, the wind swayed the leaves of trees, the sun followed its relentless course in the sky. And here, in this sterile hospital, two souls who met by chance fought for one more dawn together, for one more chance to prove that some loves, even when late, can bloom with an intensity capable of illuminating the entire world. 5 years had passed since that morning at the hospital. The New Dawn Institute flourished in the hills of Savannah, daily welcoming dozens of children and mothers who found there not only material support, but also the opportunity to transform their lives through education and shelter. Victoria walked through the corridors illuminated by the golden light of late afternoon, observing with satisfaction the classrooms still occupied by study groups, the library where teenagers bent over books with genuine concentration, the community kitchen where a professional cooking course was in progress. Director Victoria, a girl of approximately 12 years, ran in her direction, eyes shining with excitement. "I finished the book you lent me. Can I take another one home today?" "Of course you can, Julie." Victoria smiled, adjusting a loose strand of the girl's hair. "Let's go to the library and choose one." Julie was one of the Institute's first students, daughter of a single mother who struggled to raise 3 children working as a house cleaner. When she arrived, she could barely read. Now she was one of the most avid students for knowledge, with dreams of becoming a doctor one day. "Do you think I can take one of those from the special shelf?" asked the girl as they walked together. "Those that have the gold label. The classics collection. I think you're more than ready for them." In the library, Victoria helped Julie choose an illustrated edition of The Little Prince, one of Richard's favorite books. Observing the girl's enthusiasm as she flipped through the colorful pages, she felt that familiar emotion, a mixture of gratitude and purpose that accompanied her in each small victory of the Institute. "Victoria," Mrs. Zelda's voice, now coordinator of the Institute's medicinal garden program, interrupted her thoughts. "Your son is in the garden with Helen. Seems they found something interesting in the vegetable patch." With a smile, Victoria said goodbye to Julie and headed to the garden at the back of the main building. There, among meticulously tended beds, her mother and her 4-year-old son were crouched, attentively observing something in the soil. "Look, Mommy," exclaimed the boy upon seeing her, his brown eyes, so similar to his father's, shining with excitement. "A butterfly coming out of its cocoon. Grandma Helen says it's a miracle of nature." Victoria knelt beside them, observing the small miracle happening before their eyes. The butterfly emerged slowly, its wings still moist and fragile, gradually, expanding under the warmth of the setting sun. "It's beautiful, isn't it, Michael?" she said, hugging her son by the shoulders. Michael Richard Adams Vanderbilt. The name chosen with so much love even before his birth carried the strength of 2 families, of 2 worlds that had met and transformed each other. "It's like the story that Daddy tells," replied the boy thoughtfully, "about how the most beautiful things need time and transformation." Victoria exchanged a moved look with Helen. Michael was growing not just with the vivacious intelligence inherited from his parents, but also with a sensitivity and wisdom that sometimes seemed beyond his years. "Speaking of Daddy," said Helen, rising with the help of a cane, her only visible sign of advancing age, since the treatments provided by Richard's generous health plan had stabilized her autoimmune condition. "Wasn't he supposed to pick you up for dinner in town today?" "Yes, he should be arriving. He had a video conference with the foundation investors." Victoria checked her watch. "Actually, it should have ended by now." As if summoned by her words, they heard the sound of footsteps approaching along the stone path. Michael was the first to notice, jumping up. "Daddy!" he shouted, running toward the approaching figure. Richard Vanderbilt, at 50 years old, still maintained the natural elegance that had always characterized him, although his hair was now completely gray. He bent down to receive his son's enthusiastic hug, lifting him in his arms with a smile that illuminated his face. "Champion, how was your day? Did you learn something new?" "Yes, about butterflies and transformation, and also about fractions in Miss Clara's class." Richard laughed, setting his son back on the ground and approaching to greet Helen with a kiss on the cheek, and Victoria with an affectionate embrace that, even after years of marriage, still contained all the warmth of a deeply grateful love. "How was the meeting?" asked Victoria as they walked together back to the main building. "Productive. We secured the funds for the expansion of the university scholarship program." He smiled, putting his arm around her waist. "And you? How was the day here?" "Transformative, as always." Richard's heart surgery 5 years earlier had been a success, although the recovery was long and marked by moments of uncertainty. The experimental procedure didn't offer a complete cure. He still lived with limitations and needed constant medication, but provided what doctors called quality years, an invaluable gift for someone who had prepared to depart. In the months following the operation, while Richard recovered, Victoria divided her time between caring for him, preparing for the baby's arrival, and taking the first steps in administering the institute. It was a period of intense learning, adaptations, and challenges, but also of a happiness she had never imagined possible. Michael was born on a spring morning, bringing with him a renewal that transcended seasons. For Richard, holding that small life in his arms, a life he had feared not knowing, was an almost mystical experience, a second chance the universe had granted him. "Ready for dinner at Harbour's?" asked Richard, referring to the seaside restaurant that had become the family's favorite for celebrations. "I can't wait," replied Michael, skipping ahead of them. "Is Grandma Helen coming too?" "Of course I am," smiled Helen. "You think I'd miss my daughter's wedding anniversary?" As they prepared to leave, Victoria observed the movement of the institute beginning to diminish with the end of the day. Staff said goodbye. Some mothers came to pick up their children. Teenagers left in groups chatting animatedly about the next day's projects. It was a scene that always filled her heart with purpose, seeing that shared dream transforming real lives day after day. In the car on the way to the restaurant, with Michael entertained by a book in the back seat, Richard held Victoria's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles in her palm, a gesture of intimacy that had become a code between them over the years. 5 years, he murmured. "It seems so much and so little at the same time." "Each day has been a gift," she replied, squeezing his hand. Harbour's was located on a rocky point with a privileged view of the bay. The owner, Mr. Carl, welcomed them with a warm familiarity reserved for special customers, leading them to the best table, from where they could watch the sun setting over the sea. "The usual to start, Mr. Vanderbilt?" asked the man with a knowing smile. "Please, Carl, and that surprise we talked about, all prepared as you requested." Michael, accustomed to restaurant dinners from an early age, thanks to Richard's insistence that he experience all aspects of life, from the simplest to the most sophisticated, behaved with surprising composure for his age, though his attentive eyes didn't miss any detail of the environment. "What's that, Daddy?" he asked, pointing to a small stage in the corner of the hall, where some musicians were beginning to position themselves. "A surprise for your mother," replied Richard with an enigmatic smile. Before Victoria could question, the musicians began to play, the first notes of "Georgia on My Mind," the song that played in Savannah Square the first time they danced together so many years ago. "May I have this dance?" Richard extended his hand, his eyes shining with that unique mixture of reverence and love that always made her heart race. In the small space by the stage, they danced as on that first day, now with more history between them, more gratitude for shared time, more awareness of the preciousness of each moment. "I have something for you," he whispered in her ear as they danced. "Something I finally finished." Back at the table, while Michael savored his favorite dessert under Helen's watchful eye, Richard handed Victoria a rectangular package wrapped in handmade paper. "What is this?" "Open it and find out." Inside the package was a book bound in soft leather. On the cover, embossed in golden letters, was written, "Beyond Time" by Richard Vanderbilt. "Your novel," she whispered, running her fingers over the embossed letters. "You finished it." "Actually, we finished it." He smiled, a contained emotion shining in his eyes. "Our story is there, transformed by fiction, but true in its essence. And something more." Victoria opened the book, flipping through the pages. "To the dedication. For Victoria, who taught me that true love transcends time, distance, and even the certainty of tomorrow. And for Michael, living proof that miracles happen when we least expect them. You are the happy ending I never dared to write." On the following pages, Victoria found not just the novel he had begun so many years before, but also letters. Letters addressed to Michael, one for each future birthday, each important milestone to come. Graduation, first job, perhaps someday his own wedding. Letters that Richard had begun to write during his recovery, preparing for the possibility of not being physically present at all important moments in his son's life. Richard. Words failed, replaced by tears of emotion. "I know I may not be here for all those moments," he explained, his voice low so only she could hear. "The doctors were clear about that. Each year is an extra gift, not a guarantee. So I started writing these letters as a way to be present even in absence. But then," he smiled, looking at Michael, who was now animatedly conversing with Helen, "then I realized that, regardless of the time we have together, the love we've built is already eternal. It's in the Institute, it's in the lives we've touched together, it's in our son, and now it's also in these pages." That night, as they returned home, no longer the imposing Willow Creek Manor, which now housed the administrative headquarters of the foundation, but a smaller and more welcoming house they had built near the Institute, Victoria reflected on the extraordinary twists life could take. 6 years ago, she was just a young teacher caring for her sick mother, curiously observing the neighboring mansion. She couldn't have imagined that a simple gesture of help to a stranger would transform her existence so completely, connecting her to a love that defied expectations and transcended limits. After putting Michael to bed, with Richard at her side, telling the nightly story that was a sacred part of their routine, Victoria went to the veranda overlooking the sea. The full moon poured liquid silver over the waters of the bay, creating a luminous path that seemed to extend to infinity. Richard joined her moments later, embracing her from behind, his chin resting gently on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" "About," he asked, his voice a murmur against her skin. "About how unpredictable life is, about how we find love in the most unexpected places." She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "About how some loves seem written in the stars, inevitable, even when all circumstances conspire against them." "Do you believe in destiny now, teacher?" he gently teased, a reference to the many philosophical conversations they had had over the years. "I believe in choices," she replied, touching his face tenderly. "In the courage to open the door when someone knocks, in the willingness to see beyond appearances, in the daily decision to love, even knowing that all love carries the risk of loss." Richard smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "You know what else I've learned from you after all these years?" he asked. "What?" "That love doesn't need to be eternal to be infinite." He brought his face closer, his lips almost touching hers. "Each moment fully lived contains its own eternity." As they kissed under the moonlight of Savannah, with the sound of waves as a soundtrack and the warm night breeze caressing their faces, Victoria felt that certainty that had grown within her over the years. Some loves don't fit in just one life. They transcend time, transform destinies, and continue to reverberate long after stories seemingly end. Because the truth she and Richard had discovered together was that there are no endings, just new beginnings, new ways to love, new ways to leave their mark on the world. And in that continuity and that capacity for constant transformation resided the true magic of love. "What do you think about spending some time in the greenhouse tomorrow?" whispered Richard. "Michael loves seeing the orchids." "Perfect," she replied, nestling more in his arms. "One day at a time, right?" "One day at a time," he agreed, each one fully lived, as if it were eternal. And in the quietness of that starry night, lulled by the sound of waves and by the love they had built against all odds, they knew they had found the rarest of blessings, not just additional time, but the wisdom to fill it with meaning. Not just a love that had withstood storms, but one that bloomed stronger with each challenge overcome. As Savannah's lights twinkled in the distance and the wind whispered among the tree leaves, Victoria and Richard remained embraced on the veranda, silent witnesses to an everyday miracle. The miracle of two lives that, upon meeting, created something greater than the sum of their parts. Something that would continue to flourish, to transform lives, to inspire hearts, far beyond the visible horizon, far beyond measurable time. Something that, like the most beautiful love stories, never really ends. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Victoria and Richard has touched your hearts deeply. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here, clicking to your left. If this narrative awakened emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Daily we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Share